Have you ever witnessed a genuinely nice person get backstabbed for no apparent reason? What happened? I found out a colleague hadn't applied for a big promotion, so I asked why, as she had shown a lot of interest in the past, having covered the position quite enthusiastically. She told me that she had been off for a few weeks and on her first day back had given another colleague a lift home, massively out of her way. It was common knowledge in the office the vacancy was coming up and we were just waiting for HR to open up applications, so whilst driving it came up, but the other person said that applications hadn't opened yet and they hadn't heard anything about the role in a while. Applications closed the following day, and I know for fact the person who denied knowing about the vacancy had already put their own application in a few days before. My colleague missed out on the role and we all learned there was a snake in the office. What's worse is the petty asshole never stood a chance of even getting an interview for the role because she was known as lazy and quite argumentative. George. Nice guy at a hardware store I used to shop at. He liked being busy and wasn't a big talker, so while the rest of the people at the store were standing around gossiping or on their phones, George would be straightening shelves, sweeping, etc. He was also very good about explaining DIY stuff to folks and was always helpful in pointing out the safest way to do something or giving you tips to save money. He worked there over 20 years and was the first guy fired in the recession because the manager thought George was too nice to resent being fired. George went to work at competitor in the next town, and once word got out that George was over there, half of the store's business followed him. That hardware store is now a walk-in clinic. As a brief follow-up, George retired a few years ago and moved to AskReddit. His father and my grandfather were good friends, and George graduated HS with one of my uncles. Was in the Navy during Vietnam. I actually didn't know George knew my family until my uncle's funeral in 2014, the last time I saw him. That's when I found out that really nice guy who used to work at the hardware store knew most of my mom's family. My grandfather bought a riding lawnmower from George in 1985, a lawnmower that is still being used. I used to work with a lady in an old IT department who was basically everyone's work mom. She did her job but also liked to make sure everyone was happy. She kept track of everyone's birthdays so she could make them a cake or cookies. She would offer to cover for you if you needed to leave early or take a long lunch or anything. Just overall a great person. Well, she was also one of the oldest, in tenure, not age, employees at the company and knew the CEO and most of the managers well. At one point there was an opening for a manager in a department she used to work in before moving to IT. We all told her to go for it. The CEO herself even suggested that she go for it. So everyone assumed she was a shoo-in and that the interview was just a formality. So, after the interview, they give the job to someone else. My coworker feels really hurt and betrayed because why would the CEO push her to apply and then not hire her for the position? Months go by and the role is vacant again, restructuring. The new manager got shuffled somewhere else, and again the CEO and some of the managers of other departments tell my coworker to apply. She is reluctant, but eventually she does. And they do it to her again. At that point she took it personally and felt like she did something wrong or wasn't a good employee or something. It killed me to see that shitty company break her spirit like that. Becky, if you somehow read this, you're the best and way better than that place deserves. I used to work with this girl who honestly is one of the top 5 nicest people I've met in my life. She really did love this job too and cared about it. She actually had 2 jobs where she started at 4 a.m. for one of them, and the other job, the one I was at, ended at 10 to 11 at night. After all this she'd give me rides home too cause I didn't have a car yet. One day her sister told her if she had half a brain she'd ask to be a server at our location because she had been working her ass off for basically a year there, working double shifts every day. Not only did management not let her be a server, once she quit, another girl who came a month before she quit ended up getting promoted to server by the end of that month. She was 3 years younger than her and had no experience serving. They just hated her for some reason and I'll never understand it. My pops worked for an oil company. Started entry level and worked his way up. I honestly cannot remember him ever taking a sick day. Quiet man. Never caused a problem. The kind of guys you would want to work in your company. Full retirement was at 35 years. They laid him off at 32 just so they wouldn't have to pay full retirement. It crushed him. I watched him decline. struggle with depression and eventually die a few years after being laid off. It's just sad that corporations can't honor employees who give their lives honoring the corporations. There was this girl in high school who was probably the kindest person I have ever met. During a football game, she would always have 200 or so cupcakes to pass out. All types of different flavors and designs on them, and everyone loved them. Well, a group of girls didn't like the attention she was getting at all and asked to help pass out the cupcakes to help. Instead, they took the cupcakes and caked them quite literally on the girl's new car. It was everywhere. The windows, the exhaust, the wheels, and a back window was also open a bit, so anything they didn't smear on the car was shoved into that window. I felt terrible seeing the car afterwards, and only one of the girls took the blame for it and didn't even end up getting into too much trouble. Sorry about your cupcakes, Hannah, sad face. A woman I taught with, Mary, who was the sweetest, most helpful patient special ed teacher I have ever met, finished her degree and she and I started teaching the same year. She worked miracles with kids everyone else just gave up on. The principal was new to the school and let her go through 2 years of new teacher probation and let her think she was getting a continuing contract. He ousted her, because he had final say on non-renewal and because she was probationary. He didn't have to provide justification. The justification was that he installed a 25-year-old leggy blonde teacher from his former school. She hated kids. I was a McDonald's manager and there was this kid who worked grill fryer. He was a little dumb. But this kid tried and had an amazing attitude even when the kitchen shit on his every move. Loved that kid. Anyway. The tiles around the oven and fryers needed to be relaid, so they were, and cardboard was thrown over them to cover the new grout. I told the kid when he came in, be careful. Blah blah blah, and then it happened. He was moving from the cabinet above the oven to the fryers to the right and slipped. He wasn't fucking around. I tried to catch him but missed and he hit hard. I witnessed the entire thing from inches away and wrote the incident report personally. He literally stepped on it. Gently. And the grease from the kitchen must have built up because he straight went back. Head hit tile. He had a concussion, but was otherwise alright except some back pain, which I think was worse than he let on. He filed for workman's comp and they denied it. Said he had a history of unsafe workplace practices or something formal for fuck off. Yet they didn't call me, the certified shift manager on duty, or even acknowledge the incident report. My little niece at 5 years old asked her mother to stop the car and let her rescue a turtle in the middle of the road. While they were standing patiently by the roadside waiting for traffic to clear. A carload of teenage boys aimed for the turtle and ran right over it in front of her. She cried for a long time. I know it was just a turtle. But to intentionally hurt and horrify a little girl just trying to help a fellow creature is sick. I hope those boys have matured by now. Maybe having kind little girls, or boys, of their own. My dad literally supported his family after moving to America for years. He sent money to his dad and stepmother, plus paid for his half-siblings' education, despite barely scraping by in the US. Fast forward to today, and all but one of them are doing super well financially. None of them showed up to my mom's funeral or did anything to offer support to my dad. Despite overcoming incredible abuse from his stepmother, I was still never allowed to call her out on it and always told to look at things from her side, which was not justifiable in any way. My cousin is genuinely one of the nicest people I have ever had the privilege of knowing. She is an elementary school teacher who apparently kicks butt at teaching too because she has won numerous teaching awards. Her husband lost his job in the recession and that's when she said he turned into a different person. He ended up cheating on her, claiming he was driven to it because my cousin is infertile. She begged him to see a couples counselor. He agreed. She set up and did all the work to get the appointment. Even though he was unemployed and the one that cheated, the morning they were supposed to go, he gave her divorce papers. She was crushed. Good news is, more than a decade on she is doing better than ever. Has met a great guy that worships her. The guy has a son and they all get along great with the boyfriend's ex-wife. They all even celebrate holidays and vacation together. She deserves every drop of happiness. I went to a very poor high school. There was a girl who would volunteer to work concessions and baked hundreds of cookies to sell and raise money for girls' athletics. as she herself played 3 sports. Over her 4 years, she had to have raised over $1,000. Her senior year, she was a manager for the volleyball team. Having been a starter the year before, I assumed she was injured and asked when she would be able to play again. I was shocked to hear she had been cut from the team. No one knew why, but you could tell she was heartbroken. Melvin and Marjorie had been married 40 years and looking forward to a comfortable retirement when Melvin told Marjorie God had called him to be a missionary in the Philippines. Marjorie, being a good Christian, supported her husband's decision, bought him luggage and drove him to the airport as a good wife does. Melvin wrote emails every day talking about his ministry and how things were going and asked Marjorie to send him money occasionally. Months passed this way and soon it was time for Melvin to come home. And he did, with a new 18-year-old bride. As it turns out, Melvin had divorced Marjorie in secret by forging her names on a do-it-yourself divorce kit and filing it with the court. Marjorie defaulted, of course, and the divorce was finalized without her ever knowing. So when Melvin returned from the Philippines, he dropped the bomb that not only had they been divorced for a year and a half but he now had this new wife, and Marjorie would need to move out of the house and into another which he, graciously, agreed she could have in the divorce she never knew about. Coldest thing I've ever seen. There were 2 people in our circle of friends who had been together for about 2 years since shortly after first meeting. They were always together, always happy and pretty much a model couple for the rest of us. She was effortlessly beautiful inside and out. Gentle, thoughtful, supportive and enthusiastic with all of us. An absolute sweetheart and a lovely person. He was fun to be around. Smart, reliable and had his shit together. Then she goes to the other side of the country for a few weeks to visit with family. At some point before this trip he found out that the sister of someone else in our circle, let's call them L, was very into him. She lived an hour away with her parents. As soon as the GF was gone he was bragging about planning to hook up with the sister. He told everybody about it and he and L would laugh and joke about it like it was a jolly win. It made the rest of us very uncomfortable. So eventually the sister, who we'd never seen before, shows up one weekend to hang out. It was awkward with a lot of wink wink nudge nudge and then they did the deed and she went home and we never saw her again. The BF and L had some more high fives. Oh. And somebody called the GF to rat him out and she wound up taking him back anyway after she got back. It was all so strange and I felt awful for her. She didn't deserve it at all. To not only have her BF cheat on her but also treat it like the grand opening of a chain store. My mom allowed my sister and her alcoholic husband to stay with us in our already cramped house with 3 teens and my sister and they got kicked out of his parents' house for being disrespectful. My mom has brain cancer and it's affected her memory. She cannot make new memories. They would say things like, "Oh, don't worry, she won't remember," or, "Just do it and tell her you told her but she forgot." I don't remember ever being that red-eyed before. The real kicker was after all of that, my sister's husband did not allow anyone to touch my niece for the first month she was living there even though he hurt her while drunk. Fuck that dude. I'm still trying to learn to forgive my sister. Don't treat my mother like shit. Period. My roommate's long-distance relationship wasn't going very well, so she lied to him and told him she was pregnant. He's very gullible and being a dad is probably his #1 goal in life. So he was super excited. And then he found out she was having twins. Dude was already looking for babysitters. But then the due date passed and he hadn't heard from her. He called and sent lots of messages. And really began to worry that she'd had some sort of emergency. 2 weeks after his twins were due, he decided enough was enough and drove all the way out there to see her in person. My poor gullible roommate thought he was about to meet his twins. But nope, not only was he not a father, but his girl had lied to keep him around while she was seeing another guy. It broke his heart. Here he was about to become a father to 2 perfect little babies. And then all of a sudden they never existed. TLDR, my roommate's long-distance girlfriend told him she was pregnant with twins. But when the due date came, she disappeared. She was never pregnant and he was crushed because he loved all 3 of them.